Good morning, everybody. Welcome to join this first panel list of the African Security Symposium, where we will talk about community policing together with Mr. Jared Ondiki. Mr. Jared Ondiki is the Chief Inspector of Police of Kenya, National Police Services, and we may have also some other stakeholders who should join us in the meantime. So, Mr. Jared Ondiki, good morning, and would you please introduce yourself, uh, give us information about your experience and feedback.
Good morning to you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to everyone, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon. So my name is Jared Ondiki, a Chief Inspector of Police, representing the Kenya National Police Service. Currently, I'm based at the Office of the Inspector General in Nairobi, where I work as a crime analyst. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jared. So, policing community is related to fight against criminology, criminalistics, and fight against terrorism. So, I would like to ask you how community policing strategy partnership between local police in Kenya and international community have contributed in combating terrorism and counter-violence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you talk about community policing, it emphasizes on partnership, which is based on proactive problem-solving efforts between the police and the public in order to identify, prevent, and solve community safety and security issues in a more efficient and effective way in terms of collaborations between the community and the police. So the police and the public partnership, the entire police organization and the relevant government agencies and the communities, they have actively cooperated in solving problems. So in order to establish such a partnership, the police must have worked closely to integrate into the community, to strengthen the public trust and the confidence in their action, particularly through the policing by consent. So as a state, which has a responsibility of providing and protecting citizens against terrorism, it has to ensure that there is measures to combat terrorism. And those measures have to comply with international law, in particular the international human law, refugee law, and the humanitarian law. Comprehensive strategic efforts are necessary to effectively counter terrorism, in particular to prevent people from being terrorists, and also to thwart terrorist suspect plans and bring them to justice. That's a court of law. Lack of effective accountability for the action of the states and its agents to counter terrorism increase the risk of human rights violation, which may fuel terrorism and undermine public trust in support for counter-terrorism efforts. So the international laws have been domesticated into our national registration, where there is a clear definition of terrorism and its underlying offenses, which has been provided to the public, which is clear and precise. There is non-discriminatory and a non-reactive manner in order to provide the basis of effective criminal justice response. So overall, the broader definition of terrorism risk undermining human rights and the rule of law. So anti-terrorism registration must be accessible to the public So the public has a responsibility to make those laws available to the public. So the states have acknowledged the usefulness of such joint efforts to form the public-private partnership in countering terrorism. So these are the approaches which have been locally tailored and driven initiatives that draws on partnership among wide range of actors beyond traditional security practitioners. This includes the public authority, civil society organization, your business sector, and the media. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jared. It's clear that in Kenya, there is a big effort from the authority and from the private sector to join this effort of community policing and to make sure that all is done under the international and national laws against terrorism. That's good. We have all suffered of the COVID-19 in the last 1.5 years. Security forces around the world have played a critical positive role during this COVID-19 crisis. What are the negative consequences happening in places where there isn't a foundation of trust between security forces and the citizen?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. As all of us know that COVID is a global threat right now, and it's all over the world, and we have to live with it. So as security forces, we want to see what happened, the negative effects during the enforcement of COVID-19 measures, where the police forces and the military officers were used to enforce the laws, and they see their effects to the society. So most of the countries around the world, they played a very critical role during the COVID-19. So as an example from Africa, Ghana, which they deployed a state of art level 2 field hospital in Great Accra. It was part of the government's COVID-19 response. Likewise, the armies in the United States of America, Serbia, Sweden, Italy, and elsewhere, they built field hospitals to boost the national capacity to treat COVID-19 patients. In Israel, also, where the Minister of Defense became deeply involved in the country's health response and even requested to be put in charge of the country's national response instead of the health ministry. However, on all, security services' contribution in the global fight have been positive. Allegations of police brutality have surfaced in several African countries and across the world. As countries moved to restrict citizen movements to control the spread of a deadly virus, heavy-handed tactics have led to serious human rights violation and even fatalities. In some cases, police and army have used excessive force against citizens who are performing essential activities. Activities like the medical doctor, journalists, men, women, youths, also the taxi drivers, business owners, worshippers, even torturers have had a difficult encounters with the police and even human rights violation. The arguable examples of the poorly managed security sector response has been in India, with multiple incidents of harsh repercussions for those who did not obey the curfew restrictions. In Niger, that's in Africa, where the government imposed rules prohibiting protesters and the public gatherings under the pretext of public health and safety. Citizens who gathered for public demonstrations to decry on the allegations of embezzlement of funds by the Ministry of Defense were met with harsh response, where 3 people died when security forces fired a tear gas bomb. So videos of rough unrest, such as the one by the French police, went viral on the social media. In India, videos of police beating worshippers also emerged during the imposing COVID-19 curfew, which made people too afraid to leave their homes and even buy food. In Nigeria, we are told that by the Human Rights Commission that at least 18 people by the mid of April during the COVID lockdown, more than 12 people who died in the same frame during the coronavirus. Also in China, security forces used a weapon of targeting African immigration population, mainly in Guangzhou. So the civil society organizations, union, human rights activists, and the citizens using social media denounced these human rights violations. So encouraging national leaders and the courts stepped in to denounce the violence by security services. So for example, both the President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda and the President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya apologized and condemned this violence carried out by security officers, causing severe injuries and deaths. This is a scenario in Uganda. A court charged 10 police officers with aggravated torture who caused the torture during the COVID-19 restrictions as a punishment for breaking coronavirus curfew. So in his apology, the President of Kenya, that's Uhuru Kenyatta, sought to reassure Kenyans that now it was the time to repeal, collaborate between security service and the citizens they serve. So, and I quote him, he said that, I want to assure you that if we work together, we all understand this problem needs all of us and we will pull in the same direction. We will overcome, end of the quote. That's the President of Kenya who gave that apology to the public to acknowledge that there was negative part of the police officer or the forces during the restriction of COVID. So involving communities in countering terrorism may, however, be challenging. There will be an history of misconception, tension between the police, intelligence agencies, and the public at large, or with some communities in particular, especially from cases of repeated police misconduct, where state authorities, while seeking to develop partnership, they should keep in mind that some individuals and the groups may be driven by personal agenda that do not necessarily correspond to the interest of the community. So traditionally, counterterrorism policies and practices have been community targeted in quotes. So, namely targeted the community for intelligence gathering and enforcement activities driven by security priorities of the state. They are focused on tactics such as the use of police, stop and search powers, covert operations, and intelligence gathering methods to detect suspected terrorists and toward their activities, especially on active plans of attacks. So such methods are necessary and a part of the effective strategy for countering terrorism, but should be carried out at times within the framework based upon the rule of law and the respect of human rights. So these methods, however, involve retro or no consultation or no partnership with the members and the groups from the public. They are not aimed at gaining trust and support from women and men in our local communities, and rarely take into consideration their diverse needs and how they differently affected by terrorism and measures against it. As such, may run the risk of marginalization, even stigmatization. Some communities and individuals may experience the negative adverse of measures or strategies when countering extreme violence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jared. Very clear and detailed information. For sure, human rights has to be respected, and it's not easy in a COVID-19 situation to apply with the right protocols, with the common protocols that there are in place. There is, based on the Committee of Intelligence and Security Service over Africa, where several countries like Kenya are participating, it's clear that there, you said that there is an international cooperation. I would like to know what kind of, let's say, information or what kind of protocols Interpol have been adding or have been recommending to the African countries in that sense, because you said clearly that there is a need of international collaboration. So what is the level of collaboration with Interpol today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So terrorism being the international threat to security and stability. So in Africa, we have what you call IGAD. That's the Intergovernmental Authority and the Development. So they have come up with measures on how they can work together to fight terrorism through conventions, treaties, and institutional mechanisms. Like now, they are recognizing international needs of terrorism. The members have agreed no individual member can single-handedly be able to deal effectively. So they have drafted some implementation plan to counter terrorism that were adopted by IGAD in the year 2003 in Kampala, Uganda, for the purpose of combating terrorism. So they have stepped up on the legal cooperation against terrorism, which have been taken by the IGAD. It also has called on member states to work towards a common legal framework, develop extradition and the mutual legal assistance. Those are the treaties, and they have encouraged what we call ratification of the relevant continental and institutional instruments. The plan also called for the increased information exchange through the Interpol, training, coordination, and international cooperation. Also, they highlighted the importance of respecting human rights while countering terrorism. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jared. It's clear that there is already let's say, a flow of information passing through African countries and Interpol in both sides in order to control the terrorism over Africa. That's a good news. That's very good for everybody. Regarding the time, the remaining time, I would like to ask you very shortly about, let's say, the community policing and the promotion of the economic and social inclusion of the returnees of terrorism, how it can be sustainable and reasonable, how we can prevent future violence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because now we want to look on the push factor that are pushing the target groups for them to engage in terrorism activities. There must be a push. What's pushing those young men and the women into that activities? So we are going to show the negative socioeconomic factors, such as corruption, lack of good governance, as well as high unemployment, especially among the youths. The youths being the major targets. So through the measures that can strengthen democratic institutions and the rule of law, including the democratic policing, promoting dialogue between the state and the society, and ensure that there is respect for human rights and the fundamental freedoms. So in combating the intolerance and the discrimination as well as promoting mutual respect for existence and the harmonious relations between ethnic, religion, linguistic, and other groups in order to prevent violent conflict, as well as promoting peaceful settlement of dispute and a resolution for existing conflict. So different forms of supports, for example, by providing safe spaces, psychological counseling, and mentoring, as well as redirecting people towards positive forms of mobilization, such as civic engagement through arts, sports, and such activities that they can engage themselves in, depending on their talent. So they should also be able to develop what we call critical thinking and self-reflection to question the violence, extremism, narratives, and ideas that they may be attracted to. So engagement should be based upon an individual where there is an assessment on a clear division of role and information sharing protocols among different actors, especially law enforcement, in order to safeguard the rights of the individual, in particular, their privacy. So people considered at risk should not be treated as potential terrorists, or otherwise they should not be stigmatized. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jared. Very clear. And it shows that, let's say, community has to follow the rules and to be supported by national police from one hand, and they have also a social and economical role in helping the young people to be aware of, to be a part of the terrorism group, for sure. That's clear. So thank you. I see that we have also some question to Mr. Madume Fortuné from Interpol, but unfortunately, Mr. Madume can't join us today. So we will take the question and we will forward the question to him. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't see any other question on the chat. So I would like to thank you for your time and for your information, Mr. Jared. It was very useful to understand how national police in Africa is helping and promoting community policing to fight against terrorism and violence. Thank you all, and have a good day. Be safe.